Well, hello and welcome to Unstuck with Charlie. My name is Charlie Arms, and today we're going to talk about narcissistic people. How should a Christian deal with, approach, handle a narcissistic person? What is a narcissistic person? How do I identify them? What do I do about them? We're going to dive in. But first, take a moment, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. Narcissism is a growing problem. Recently, there was a study involving 37,000 college students. Researchers found that over a 30-year time period, narcissistic personality traits rose at the same speed as obesity rates. That's pretty alarming. For some, their narcissism reaches a level of being clinically diagnosed as narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. And this requires extensive treatment to remedy. Now, you may not be in a relationship with anyone who suffers from a diagnosable case of NPD. You have likely had to deal with, though, someone else's narcissistic behavior. When someone treats you as though you are a means to their self-important ends, these relationships can be frustrating, disorienting, and sometimes even downright harmful to your mental health. As Christians, how can we respond to narcissistic people in our lives in a way that is both healthy and holy? Okay? The first step is being able to recognize a narcissistic person when you see one. The hallmark of narcissism is a preoccupation with self. You see the image here, the looking in the mirror all the time. That's kind of a general image we have of narcissism. Narcissistic people, though, are very self-confident, even charming, and that can help them gain influence and advancement. However, as you get closer to them, what you find is they often lack empathy and are prone to lash out at others when they feel their personal fulfillment is being encroached upon. Narcissists may attack or accuse those who contradict them, even going as far as to humiliate them publicly. They may become jealous of others' success or relationships and attempt to isolate those close to them while attacking their self-esteem through constant insults and put-downs. In an effort to control others, narcissistic people may even meticulously monitor their movements and whereabouts of the people closest to them. Narcissistic people cannot stand the thought of being wrong. When challenged about their behavior, they become oversensitive and go on the attack. They may gaslight people who call them out by denying what they said or did. Other times, they may just claim what they said or did was a joke. It's just misinterpreted, and that their accuser is being overly sensitive. Narcissistic people are incredibly adept at turning the blame on anybody and everybody but themselves, at often projecting their own failures and shortcomings on others and accusing the people in their lives of the very things they themselves are guilty of. Now, living with or being close to a narcissistic person can be, at the very least, emotionally taxing. At its worst, you may find yourself suffering abuse. Whether a person has NPD or simply displays narcissistic tendencies, it can be difficult to know how to interact with them, especially for Christians who want to behave in a way that is consistent with godly character. I'm going to give you 4 quick things that you need to keep in mind if you're dealing with someone in your life who is acting narcissistically. 1, remember that you are not a doormat. You hear that? You're not a doormat. All Christians are called to grow in the fruit of the Spirit, right? Galatians 5. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These are Christian qualities of Christ that we're called to walk in the Spirit and produce, right? But Christians must also recognize that love is not opposed to preserving yourself against the abuses of others. Patience is not opposed to setting limits. Gentleness is not opposed to rebuke. And while self-control keeps us from lashing out in unhealthy and ungodly ways, it does not require us to continue putting ourselves in situations where we are at risk of being emotionally, spiritually, or even physically harmed. The fine line Christians must walk is always striving to be kind while not enabling the mistreatment or abuse, right? Refusing to hold a grudge while not allowing narcissistic people to continually tear us down. The line can be difficult to find, particularly when the narcissistic person is someone close to your heart, such as a parent, a sibling, someone you have admired or looked up to. Discernment requires prayer, so we must seek God's wisdom as we learn to deal with narcissistic people in our lives. 1, you're not a doormat. 2, set boundaries and stick to them. It's important to remember when dealing with a narcissistic person that you can't control how they act or what they feel toward you, but you can control what you do. Set firm boundaries and commit to sticking to them. These boundaries might include removing yourself from a situation when a narcissistic person begins attacking you, refusing to respond favorably when they launch into a diatribe that assumes the worst of others' motives, speaking up when they have shared your personal information without permission, or standing firm when you've told them no. Be gracious in the way you go about setting and communicating these boundaries. Also be strategic. When dealing with a narcissist, open confrontation is rarely the most helpful way to address your concerns with their behavior. Their oversensitivity to critique will lead them to relentless attack. Or you'll become fixated on proving that they might become fixated on proving that you are the problem. This could result in relational setback rather than progress. So strive to be prudent and empathetic, even as you strive to be firm. When setting firm boundaries, you may sometimes feel as though you're being overly rigid, selfish, or mean. In fact, the narcissistic person who doesn't like your boundaries may even try to convince you of this, right? Nevertheless, it's important to remember that these boundaries are necessary. You got to do it to preserve your emotional, spiritual, even physical well-being. To be sure, this is an end unto itself, but you also can't be the person God has created you to be or do the things He has called you to do with full effectiveness if your health and well-being are perpetually compromised. And what's more, that if your well-being is compromised, it is likely the well-being of those closest to you that are compromised as well. 3, find support from trusted friends and confidants. When dealing with a turbulent relationship where the other person is constantly questioning your interpretation of your experiences with them, you may find yourself getting turned around. You may begin to wonder, is it just me? This is important. This is why it's important to have people in your life who are godly, that you trust, that you can turn to when you need to debrief an experience with a person in your life who is narcissistic. Now, you always want to guard yourself against gossiping or complaining unnecessarily. You may find it helpful to recount a conversation, though, or a conflict with a narcissistic person to see if your confidant recognizes the same troubling pattern of behavior you do. Now, this person can be a close friend, a pastor, a therapist, a mental health professional. Whoever it is, ask them if they are interpreting the situation the same way you are, or whether your current course of action is the healthiest or godliest response. But you got to be willing to listen when they seek to help you reframe the situation in a way that may be different from your current perspective. Obviously, you never take advice that will require you to reinsert yourself into an unhealthy situation. But you got to be open to having a trusted friend or confidant guide you through the process of recentering your experience in a way that is most healthy for you. 4, recognize when you need to exit the relationship. The unfortunate reality when dealing with a narcissistic person is that even if you are incredibly gracious and clear with your boundaries, you strive to be forgiving, you overlook offenses, and you return kindness for every attack, there may come a point at which the relationship is untenable, and you must begin to disentangle your life from theirs. Now, this is particularly true where there is abusive behavior, especially if this narcissistic person is an authority figure, a pastor, a parent, a boss. Making the decision to step back from a relation or remove yourself from a relationship isn't something you should take lightly. Not that you would, as doing so can be incredibly disruptive to your life, resulting in relational losses within your family, right? Or a close friend, maybe even your church community. It's difficult. It's hard. Choosing to end a relationship ought to be the last resort, but even still, it may become necessary. In the middle of all this, remember to grieve your losses, to be intentional about guarding yourself against bitterness and resentment. And that isn't an easy thing to do, I know. We deal with it all the time. But remember that we serve the God who heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. We look to a Savior who offers us rest for our souls, right? The path to healing and wholeness isn't always a straight one, isn't a straight line, but through every peak and every valley, we have a God who is close to us and cares for us. Narcissists in our life constantly use us to their own ends. Jesus gave his very life so that we might become everything he created us to be. Now, thanks for listening, and I hope this has been helpful. Have a great day, and let's move forward.